is it ever moral for any father to have his child beat beyond recognition and tortured to death so that he can help and or forgive the rest of his created children?
And, well, like I said earlier, I cannot imagine a scenario where that would be the case. Now that I've had some extra time to think, I still can't come up with a scenario that would, to me, justify such an action. The best you could say is that this would be a scare tactic to say this could happen to you. But one thing I've recently come across is there are, if you take the Jesus story as it happened, as it's laid out in the New Testament, the entire event occurred in a day. In fact, I believe it's Pontius Pilate who makes the comment that he's surprised how quickly Jesus died while on the cross, and then revived 3 days later. And since then, I've come across, there are, without going into detail, some very horrible things people suffer through that are much, much worse than what would have occurred there. And so again, I cannot think of any scenario that would justify either the torture of Jesus as laid out in the New Testament as a way of forgiveness, or to take from that story and apply it to others that are still ongoing with people today suffering, that would somehow justify anything.
Well, actually, I'm not trying to correct you like a school marm or anything, but
Yeah, I'm welcome to.
It took about 36 hours from the time that the Last Supper was over with, through everything that they went through, his arrest in the garden, I should say, and then the beatings and the trial, mock trials, and all, and the crucifixion. So, it wasn't just like this. He had gone for a good period of time without, sleep. It was 36 hours of sleep deprivation and whatever. So that's the account that's given, if it's to be believed in. I don't know. I think it might be John actually. So
Okay.
I was just going to bring you up to speed on the 36 hours.
That's fine.
next
I'll
time.
admit it's been a while since I've actually gone through the New Testament.
Oh,
again.
yeah, I hear you. Me too, really.
When you hear stories like this, and I'm trying to posture various kinds of theologies, because today, if we turn on the television, we're going to hear some healing evangelists who will say, by his stripes we are or were healed. And so the impression that most people are getting in the crowd would be this: Jesus was beaten beyond recognition, so my Heavenly Father would heal me. Do you feel like that's a reasonable thing to believe?
Speaking as someone who did believe that and no longer does, I can't see it as being reasonable any longer. I remember Christopher Hitchens spoke about that one time, the idea that someone else can take responsibility for your sins without asking, without taking your permission before you were even born, and has absolved your debt while also giving you this new debt as well. For myself, I would never ask that if I did a wrong and I was to be imprisoned or even to be put to death, I would never ask that anybody else would fulfill that for me. It is my responsibility. It was my action. And if I would not, say I had the option of someone else who was a prisoner who had committed a crime worse than mine, and the option was, well, he could do it for you. No. It was my action and my responsibility.
Well, would you do that for someone else? Would you volunteer for your mother or father? And, I would volunteer for any of our children and my friend's husband,
I would, and you can look at that and say that is a moral action in that sense, in the sense that you are giving of yourself. But to me, the moral responsibility lies on the person who committed the action.
Right, I agree.
So
with
it
that.
should, it would be an instance of an honor in the old school. You make the offer knowing the person will not accept it, but knowing that you should make the offer. Sure. But the responsibility lies on yourself to correct the actions that you've done or to pay for them. And no one else can actually absolve that of you. Only either the person you've wronged or the people who are holding you accountable for the wrong that you did, and yourself. People talk about forgiving yourself like it's easy. It is not. We're probably our worst critics.
True.
Now, Alan, you have the most amazing hat on, and so this question goes to you. Have you always been an atheist?
Well, no. Up to the age of 10, I believe, I switched between Baptist and Catholicism, and there was a point where I regularly went to a Lutheran Baptist church, which was a very unique mix. But around the time of my adolescence, which was 13, 16, I came into what some people would call the age of reason, and I started questioning, but at the time I didn't know atheist, and I didn't understand that there was such a term till I was full well and grown. And ever since I found it, it is a little more difficult to converse with certain crowds. I've gone to jobs and I was scared that people were just going to verbally attack me if I said I was an atheist. Mm-hmm. So I use terms that are similar, like secular humanist, or one that I'm part of now, which is the Unitarian Universalist, which is a non-denominational. And so that for the sake of getting along well with others off the start, I will say one of those. And after a time I say, in actuality, yes, I don't believe in any thing that can't be proven to me.
Is it difficult for people to come out of the closet when it comes to atheism?
For certain people, yes. Because if you come out of the closet and someone's standing there waiting to attack you or willing to attack you, then you become scared, and it's just a mentality that you're given and is very difficult to overcome. It's much like a habit. So unfortunately I was subjected to that, and it's just a habit that I have to hide at first behind similar sounding titles.
Oh, why do you go to a church, a Unitarian church? What's the purpose?
The community. The people there are very happy. But I've been to many of churches. Several years ago, I was on a journey and I went to a Presbyterian church in South Carolina. And it was a beautiful church. The people were friendly. They were very supportive of their community. The Unitarian Universalist church I go to because I feel like I don't have to hide there. It's, hi, I'm this. And they say, well, welcome to the community. And it's just a very heartwarming experience to be there.
Yeah.
So when did you really realize that you didn't believe in God?
It would have to be about 7-8 years ago. That someone, just in passing, someone said, "Oh, you're an atheist," and I started looking it up and everything, and just went like, "Well, I guess I am," and just kind of fell into it, really, because I was trying to find something that would fit me as an individual.
Right, right. Now, tonight we're simply trying to explore people's lives, and we don't want to dig too hard, because I have found that when dealing with a subject like this, atheists are going through various kinds of hells.
Persecutions.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, I was talking with one professor from the University of West Florida, and this particular professor will be unnamed tonight, but that person can't even admit to being an atheist in public for fear that they may lose their job. And so this is big. It's a big problem in our society. In other words, if you choose to be an atheist, it's not easy, in a sense, if you're working for, say, this particular place or that place. And so the New Covenant group is not about just theists, but it's about atheists and theists coming together. It's not about theological agenda. It's not about any of that. It's simply about community. It's simply about people coming together, having the ability to talk about all of it honestly and move forward together. Because at the end of the day, we have to admit we're not looking at different groups of evidence that are not the same. We're looking all at the same evidence. And for some reason, I find that theism has created a model of dividing people, and this has caused, much damage over the years. And so hopefully we can get past that. Let's move on a little bit into Michael's life. Michael, how long have you been an atheist or a skeptic?
Well, for how long I've been a skeptic, that's a good question. It's been longer than I can actually tell you. As I can tell you how long I've been an atheist, and that's probably about 4 years, exactly. With me, I went through Pensacola Christian College, or not college, I'm sorry, Pensacola Christian Academy. In fact, before it became the academy, back when it was still a school. From there, I also was still going to a Catholic church. Now, the Pensacola Christian is a evangelical Christian school. They both very much disagree with each other on that slight paraphrasing of a sentence in New Testament somewhere. That's not true. That's a joke. It's one of those basic, they all have the same scripture, they all have the same basic teachings, but the other one is definitely going to hell.
Sure.
And that was something I found out. I was baptized Catholic, didn't know it at the time. I was young, very young at this point. And when I found out I was transferring to St. Michael's, which is was a school here in Pensacola, very nice school. Mm-hmm. I remember telling the nurse at Pensacola Christian Academy this, and that I was going to a Catholic school. And her statement was that, they're all idol worshipers and devil worshipers, don't you know? It's like, no, I don't know. But that's how I was raised at this school, was, everyone else is wrong. We are right. We have the true story and all the true information, and everyone who doesn't believe as we do is going to hell.
Yeah.
Now, at the same time, I was going to a Catholic church, but a lot of it's the same, and I'm a young kid, and okay, sure, 2 different things being told to me, okay, I can take that. But when they told me that, and then I'm transferring to a Catholic school, it did make me wonder, why is one going to hell and the other not? And I asked, well, okay, actually, they're both going to hell if you listen to the other one. Well, this third group, you have the Presbyterians. Well, everybody else is going to hell, but we're not. And my grandparents were Methodists, and I would go to Methodist church with them. And I actually enjoyed that Mass much more than the Catholic or what we did with the evangelical church that was on campus at Pensacola Christian Academy, because that was actually more communal. Everybody was allowed to go up partake of communion. But again, you have the same thing. Everybody else is wrong and we're right. And I began to realize as I grew older, and this is from many other things as well, that at some point someone here is wrong. Obviously, these are all different. They're all taking the same basic story, but coming to much different conclusions. And they're all saying basically the same thing, but everyone else who doesn't agree is going to burn in hellfire for all eternity. So I had to think about that. And at the same time, when I was going through CCD, at the Catholic Church, and they've renamed it since then. I don't remember what the term is now. But this is basically about you're being taught about Catholicism, about the different saints and how the church works and everything else. And my CCD teacher probably did the worst thing he could have done to a kid like me, and he gave me an actual, real book on Egyptology. Not a Christian book, not a kid's book. It was an actual solid book on Egyptology. And I made the mistake of giving it to my sister. And I never saw it again. But in it, it talks about the different pantheons of the gods. It talks about their creation myths. It talks about the history of Egypt. And two things I noticed were missing. No mention of the Jews or the early Hebrews at all, or Israel, or Exodus, or any of the big parts from the Old Testament, which were supposed to be kind of big stories.
Maybe they were embarrassed.
Well, there is that. The Egyptians would, the Pharaoh never lost a battle. He just kept winning them closer and closer to home, as it turns out. But you'd still expect there to be something. You can't live in an area for so long without leaving some marking of your passing. And there is some, but nothing that would show slavery or anything. The other thing was they did talk about slavery in Egypt. That would have been about the time that the Exodus was supposed to have occurred. And it's not the slavery that's outlined in the Old Testament. It's better. It's imprinted. It's internship, basically, or apprenticeship, basically, for that time period. And from reading that book, from reading these myths, and seeing how similar some of them were to the ones I was being taught, and then also reading other myths, the Greek myths, the Norse myths, some of the Hindu myths, I began to realize there's a lot of similarity here. And this is why I'm saying I'm a skeptic much longer ago than I was an atheist, because these do raise questions. And especially because at some point, and this was much later, I began to realize these people believed in these religions as strongly, maybe even stronger, than most of the people alive now who are believing Christianity, Hinduism, Judaism, the other popular ones that are still around. Buddhism is another large one, of course. And that really had a big effect on me when I realized that. Because according to what I was being taught, now if they're lucky, if they're lucky and they never heard about Jesus and they never heard about God, then they get to go to purgatory. Or maybe they'll go to heaven. It does depend on the different Christian interpretations. But if they did hear about Jesus, and I was explicitly told if they heard anything about Jesus, then they would be going to hell if they did not accept him. Well, being a fan of history, even as young as I was in my mid-teens, I realized, well, who are the people teaching about Christianity? They came with guns, they came with swords, they came with terror and fire and burning, and they destroyed. And later they built, but first they destroyed. And that was how they spread Christianity. And I asked my teacher, and I asked the priests there, this was when I was still at Pensacola Christian Academy. Now, I know for me, that wouldn't work. Maybe they're saying that this is a nice God, that he's a great God, that he's forgiving, but while they're saying that he's forgiving and he's kindness and he's going to help you, if I was a person at this time, I would be watching my family put to death, my homes burned, my fields razed, the libraries, being a reader, what happened to the Aztecs and Mesoamericans, the cultures there, wasn't Aztecs, it would have been the Mayans, I think. Mesoamerican cultures, not my preference. But they burned all their books. We have a few scraps remaining and whatever they left on the actual temple walls. And that's it, because it's heretical. So a lot of the stuff that we don't know about the culture that we would want to know is because the Catholic invaders burnt it. So to say that out of that, seeing that's the people who are teaching this, and then to say that with that response you're going to hell, I began to realize, well, this can't be true. There's no moral foundation here. There's no honesty here. And I went to Catholic school as well, and these were the same questions. The Catholic Church was responsible for this. They've apologized since, but they apologized too late. And they will make the claim, what was a victim of the times. You can't claim to be a moral standpoint if your morals change with the times. You know, one thing I'll say about atheists is, yes, we do pick and choose with our morality, but at least we admit it.
Do you feel comfortable, that is, being an atheist, as opposed to being a theist?
For the most part, yes. It doesn't change anything about who I am. I'm still a good uncle. I still hope I'm a good son. I still help my friends. I still care about family, friends, other people. Maybe more now that I'm an atheist, because this is the only chance you get, and I would want everybody to have as best of a chance at life as they can. The only thing that I would say that I lost leaving religion, aside from the people I lost when I let them know I was an atheist, is one thing religion does have is they have a very strict guideline on what it takes to be a good person. And it's very obvious and laid out in the book. You follow these laws, you're a good person. I've met people who follow those laws and are, to me, jerks at best. But you know, that is an advantage that they have, and I think that's why religion still holds such a sway, is because if you follow this, you will be a good person. No one wants to know the thought of not being a good person. For most people, for average people who are mostly decent people, that's a problem. It will always bug you. Am I doing the right thing? And that's one thing I did lose.
Alan, are you comfortable where you're at in your journey?
I'd have to say so. Yes, I am. Then, wow, everything just kind of like disappeared off my
Well, is there like another, I don't know, it's not like a pyramid scheme, but is there another level that is out there that you can reach or attain? Or, you know, you say atheist, then now humanist. Is there another one that you're interested in that you could move to, or we can congeal together?
To be honest, the secular humanist is, if I'm not mistaken, a freethinker, basically, but they hold themselves to humanist morals. And I liked the title, so I'm using that instead of atheist, mostly as a cover.
Oh, gotcha.
Because of when I come across situations where the people will be, that I know the people will be hostile, or I don't know how they're going to react if they find out I'm an atheist, then I say, no, I'm a secular humanist. And when they get confused at first saying, what is that? Because they haven't heard of secular humanist. And I say, well, it's a person who is mostly free of thought, who I just said that wrong, didn't I?
Yeah. But do go on. I like that.
You know, the thing that I love about Alan, he is so genuine, so nice, and I hope tonight, if we accomplish anything, we prove to theists that lots of atheists are wonderful saints, if I can use that, concerning atheists, because you guys are wonderful people. I mean, you care. Every time that you come to the studio, we're elated. I mean, we love you guys. You guys show so much love to us. In fact, sometimes you guys bring brownies, and you can't improve life without brownies, and that's wonderful. I would like to get Sean in the conversation, and we're playing musical chairs here tonight, and so Alan, let him take your spot, if you would. I want you to come back here in a few minutes, but you've said some wonderful things. Love your hat. We have Sean with us tonight, and I think that he's going to add something to the conversation that possibly might spice it up a bit. But I may be wrong. But
hope not.
you came our way. I mean, I didn't know you, but you found maybe a YouTube video or whatever. How did you find us?
The way I found you was someone had put a link to the Cy Ten Bruggencate, not debate, but discussion, and I watched it on this channel. And I watched it from beginning to end, so I was kind of taken aback by your stance personally, and the honesty that was going back and forth, which in most cases was going back and forth. So I took an interest in it, started looking at more of the videos, and then I kind of spliced, some segments of that discussion together and put it on my channel so more people could see the debate. Because I do think that theists somehow get pushed into a box of only being one way. And that's why I said I was taken aback a little bit, because now I can, use you as an example of a rational theist. Then you have, the creationist part of it, which is on the other end of the spectrum. So I was happy to see that, actually. That's how I came across you.
How long ago did you become an atheist, or have you always been an atheist?
I would say it would be a little cliche for me to say that I'm a 9/11 atheist, but 9/11 really got me thinking about ideologies and the dangers of them. I started watching, there's a link to how I finally ended up watching Christopher Hitchens stuff. But for my whole life, pretty much before then, it's always been let people just be the way they are, and that's it. That it causes no problems. And 9/11 kind of changed that, because it's like, hey, it's right here in your face. This is, something that can be dangerous if used wrong. And I think who I admire the most is Christopher Hitchens, because he, instead of just being pacifist about it, basically gave you the tools to answer some of the questions that theists sometimes would throw at us. You can't explain this, you can't explain that. And it really, the knowledge gave you the confidence to start engaging with people about their beliefs. But I don't know if I would have ever said I was a true believer from the beginning. It's just always been around.
So you never got saved, born again, or anything like that?
I may have, before I was old enough to even understand what that meant. Maybe I was baptized, but I don't remember it at all.
See, I got saved at 4 years old. I was told that I was wicked, wretched, on my way to hell. And so at the age of 4 years old, I walked down the aisle, and found the altar somehow, crying my eyes out. I was scared to death. I didn't want to go to hell at the age of 4, but I felt so wicked, and so I got saved. I have rejected my salvation. And so it's a shock to most theists when I say I reject my salvation. I don't think that anyone needs to be saved unless they're in a burning building or drowning somewhere in a pool. And
well, to threaten someone with hell and say if you don't do, especially children, you're terrifying them into a way of life, and that's definitely wrong.
Yeah, we have T-shirts that say "Teaching Hell is Child Abuse," and we wear those different places on purpose, to get a reaction. I guess maybe that's kind of how we are. But in Walmart, that one dude over there by the, he was really gruff about it. When
he was. I remember we do lots of bowling, and we used to do a lot of league bowling. And when I would wear my Teaching Hell is Child Abuse shirt when bowling, it was interesting because most people who bowl in this particular area are very much in a particular mindset of theology. And so when they would look at me, teaching hell is child abuse, I was told so many times, you better repent. You're on your way to hell, things of that nature. Very caring people.
I've got I've got a sticker that I've been debating putting on my car or not, but it's along the same lines. It says, "Have you threatened your child with eternal damnation today?" And just has like a little child on it. I mean, I don't know how the reaction would be just given this area. So
I think you should do it. We would do it.
What motivates you to put videos together and share so many of these wonderful videos that you're putting out? I love Christopher Hitchens. I wish he were still with us, but he's not. But he was a powerful speaker, and I'm trying to remember the debate or the address that he gave. That is, I think it was to the Catholic Church. It was a powerful.
The Dembski debate, where he was his closing statement in the Dembski debate.
I think so.
Where he's take the risk of thinking for yourself.
Right.
Much more truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you that way.
It was powerful, magnificent. But Christopher Hitchens, in my opinion, was one of these guys who knew how to move a crowd. In other words, lots of people will say, he wasn't being that rational. Well, sometimes what he would do, he would use a case of metonymy, and he would work upon words and try to nuance things simply to make a teaching point. I found that Jesus did the same thing in various equations. Lots of people are jumping to the wrong conclusions, thinking that he was saying one thing when he really wasn't. He would simply try to make teaching points by taking people's fiction, if you will, and actually fighting fiction with fiction. For instance, when we read the New Testament, oftentimes Jesus would take their parables or their legends and fiction, and he would actually defeat their fictions and their various parables with parables, fiction and legends. And so I found that Christopher Hitchens reminded me a lot of Christ. That is, the Christ that we know through reading the Greek text. It's not the Christ that we know through the English text at all. But, I find that the Christ represented in the Greek text is much different than what we find in the English meta-language.
Well, do you believe in an historical Jesus?
I've been watching the debates recently on that, and I would say that there's probably enough evidence to say that a person named Jesus existed and moved some people in one way or another. I would say that it'd be pretty irrational to say that he didn't exist at all as a person, in my opinion.
What about you, Mike?
I watch a lot of debates and read a number of books as well, and at this point I'm kind of agnostic on it. There's some very persuasive evidence that he did exist. There's very persuasive evidence that he did not exist. There's persuasive evidence that there were many, many preachers around at the time who were all more of the doomsday style that we see coming from the New Testament in some of the speeches that he would give, such as he would return within the generation of the people attending the final ascension to heaven. And I don't think at this point it's possible to know.
Let me read something, and this comes from one of our viewers, and this is about Alan, the guy with the hat. Love Alan. Charlie says, Alan's honesty on this show, that is about his hesitance to be honest about being an atheist for fear of engaging with hostile people. He said, it takes my breath away. He said, I know theists who would judge him for not being forthcoming. I don't see it that way. I see it as a convicting testimony concerning the hatred that disguises itself as righteousness that lies within the ranks of religious people. And he says, thanks, Alan. And so you have someone out there that's a fan of you. And so I find that to be wonderful. And they may even like your hat. And Michael, this comes from Monica Livingston. She said, Michael is making some wonderful points. And you guys were talking about humanism quite a bit. This comes from Christian Luca. I think he's a physicist or a chemist, one. I don't know which, but he's a wonderful individual. His question is this: does humanism consider or take into account other beings besides humans in a descending scale of importance based on the sentiments felt toward other living beings?
I know that, and this may be the case now. I don't have a current copy of the manifesto, but there is a humanist manifesto, which kind of lays out the guidelines. When I said earlier, in fact, that we pick and choose our morality, I actually came up with that line before I became a humanist. So there is some guidelines we follow there. There is a movement to try to get animals treatment put into the Humanist Manifesto, and I kind of agree with this. One thing I've said before is there is a point where I begin to realize there's no moral argument to eat meat. And being someone who comes from a family of farmers, I know the difference between an actual a farm, such as what you might picture, and how cattle and animals are treated in these mass production facilities. With bovine growth hormones, the way the chickens are kept in a cage where they do not see daylight. And there's even the environmental impact, which environmentalism is on the Humanist Manifesto. I know that for sure. And the environmental impact from raising cattle is huge.
This person was on a Google Hangout Wednesday night. And by the way, if any of you guys want to be on that Google Hangout Wednesday night, we're having another one Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. This person's name is Ariel. He said, God is the biggest believer in human potential. That is, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on that? And I know that you don't believe in God, but just that idea. What are your thoughts on that?
I would hope every person is the biggest believer in human potential. And I would really hope that. I mean, if you look at the things we've done over the past century, now we've made many bad things. There's been the wars we fought for no reason. There's been the wars we fought for a reason, and that reason was horrible. There's been the nuclear weapons we developed. But look what we did with the rockets we used to launch weapons. We went to the moon. Now, it was political. It was not for a scientific or just for curiosity, but we went to the moon. We banded together as a nation to go to the moon, another planet. We are beating diseases every day. We are finding ways to use HIV or use the autoimmune disease itself to treat cancer. We're finding ways to help other people, to bring aid to people in foreign countries. The simple fact is, things are getting better every day, and it's not people praying, it's not people getting down on their knees or going to church every Sunday or just on the holidays, or no matter how strongly they believe in whatever deity or religion they are, things are getting better because we're working hard to make them better.
Sean, why do you think so many people are getting saved?
That's a good question. To me, it's really a strange thing to hear about people getting saved. I know what it means to them, but I don't understand really what they're getting saved from. I don't understand the whole concept of born, in original sin, and I don't understand what they're getting saved from. So to me, I know it's not a joke, but it's just something that I've never really understood, getting saved. And then seeing how people act afterwards kind of mutes it, I guess.
So do you really see a real difference between the time that a person gets saved and then afterwards?
There's probably I don't know what the statistics on it are, but there's probably like a couple of weeks where they buckle down and try to follow what they've agreed to. But yeah, that's all I could really say about that. It's a strange concept to me, actually. So,
do you think that it's reasonable for people to read the Bible?
In the right context, because I would never deny that there's not good things in the Bible. When I found out my best friend was Pentecostal and went to church with him and saw what was going on there, I was fascinated actually, because there were people talking in tongues, rolling around on the floor. So I was, well, I'm going to read this Bible. There's something. These are people that I know to be sane, rational people. So I'm going to start reading the Bible just to see what it says. And then I started from the beginning, and it was very disturbing. It gave me nightmares, actually, reading some of the stuff in there.
Are you talking about stories like Elisha walking down the road and 42 children curse him? And, I mean, not curse him, but call him baldy, and he turns around and curses them, and then God sends the 2 she-bears, stories like that?
Well, it's even more specific than that. Is I've seen what a stoning looks like. So when I hear that word thrown out casually, to me that's the most gruesome thing I've ever seen in my life, and to just hear that that's a punishment for something, it blows my mind. So that's when I say if you should read it and be careful what you take from it, because you can, obviously get some pretty bad stuff from it.
I wish people could be here in the studio and look at how you're saying this, actually, because I see someone who really is fighting hard to say stoning is not moral. Am I misreading you?
Not at all. No, it's not. In any situation.
I mean, what were you in a different country when you saw it? Or, I mean, it might be painful to tell.
Well, there was it was a headline news story about someone that was going to be stoned, and I get curious about what exactly is involved in that. And then I came across a PDF of the actual stone size requirements, and not too big, not too small. And I guess it would be a morbid curiosity to see such a thing, and it'll change you. If you see it, it's you'll never take the word lightly. It's not. I always tell people, before I saw that, I saw it as kind of a rough game of dodgeball, but it's when you see it, it sinks in.
Yeah.
You know exactly what's going on.
Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful. What can you do to educate theists that would be healthy for them?
To educate them, usually I just ask questions. That's the only. It's fascinating when people are fundamentalists or evangelical. I like to hear how they got there and what their opinion of me is. I think the biggest problem is a lot of them don't know what's in their book, and atheists, just because I don't know, we look it up more, that we have some very painful bullet points that we can bring to their attention. And
can you give me a few examples?
Well, one would be the stoning. A buddy of mine, the Pentecostal friend of mine, just got married, and his wife was also a Pentecostal, and due to their circumstances, the Bible at least told a story saying that we should take her to her father's front doorstep and stone her to death because of the interactions they had prior to marriage. And a lot of them don't know that, and a lot of them, it's really the cherry picking is, I think, a strategy that's worked out really well. And now where you can just instantly type in a passage. If I say stone your daughter to death, someone can Google that and instantly find out exactly where that's at and look at all the different translations of it, and it still results in the murder of somebody for not that bad of a crime, I guess. So.
Does it bother you that God sent a flood and killed everyone but 8 people and a handful of animals?
Well, I'm glad he saved the animals. That was awful nice of him. I find it hard to believe that. Well, okay, if it were true, yes, I would have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with it because I don't personally believe that that happened. But given the scenario it did, yes, yeah, I would see that being a problem.
Michael.
Well, I just wanted to add on. I've mentioned that a few times to religious people, and one thing I've noticed they'd never realize is that if it's only the 8 people who made it onto the ark, there were obviously other people around. There would have had to have been children. Regardless, there would have been children. And so they focus on, well, the people were wicked.
Right.
And somehow the animals were wicked too. You know, evil giraffe, I don't know how that would work. But, okay, fine. Evil people need to be killed. Old Testament, fine. There would have been children. So that story, the basic point they're saying is, we justify drowning children with this story.
Sure, that's exactly what it says.
And I've noticed a lot of people haven't thought about that.
No.
And
You know, it seems like you would wake up if you could see, you know, polar bears walking in, and you see elephants and then kangaroos hopping and ducks and just all of these different animal groups walking toward this large, you know, ark, if you will. It's, you know, that takes time for all of them to walk, you know, that distance. And so if you saw this happening every day and they're all getting on this one ship, if you will, it seems like people would say, hey, you know, there's something to this. Mm-hmm. But that's not what you find in the story. In fact, when you do higher forms of textual criticism, you're going to find that this is not a story original story that came to the Jews. This was a story that was actually plagiarized by Ugaritic tablets and actually inserted into the Torah. And I think that it's very, very disingenuous, the majority of the time, to even look at these particular passages and even give them credence, that is, as to their morality. But I think it's also disingenuous to even give them credence as to these are the original stories of what Moses was telling in his day. I mean, these are very spurious things to even contemplate. But I want to go a little bit further. I want to ask you some theological questions, if possible. And you guys have been so wonderful at answering so many things. What are your thoughts on people who teach penal substitution? In other words, Jesus had to die, so I don't have to die. That is, God's going to take out all of his wrath on his son Jesus instead of pouring out all of his wrath on me. What are your thoughts on penal substitution?
Well, kind of like I said earlier, I don't accept that idea. Now, being as I did go to Catholic church and Catholic school and was partially raised Catholic, that's a big thing in Catholicism, and that's guilt. It is, you have to accept the guilt for what Jesus did, admittedly unasked, but you know, you have this guilt that's given to you basically from the day you're born, from the time as you grow up in this religion of Catholicism. You're taught you are guilty, you are a sinner, you are evil. But luckily Jesus came and took your sins, so you have to thank him every day. You have to be subservient to him and to his will and through those who speak for his will. And if you want to be extremely cynical about it, and there's some cause to be, there's 2 reasons why that's so prevalent. 1, it's a very good control technique, and 2, it keeps people from asking questions.
True. We want to keep this open. We're playing musical chairs tonight. I do want to get to the point where we can ask the atheists, that is, questions. And so if you would like to ask a question directly to our atheist here tonight, please send me a text message at 850-572-7441. And do we have another person that would like to share how they came into atheism? We have another individual.
Daddy.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Okay.
What about unicycle?
I wanted to ask, did you want to ask a question possibly to some of the atheists tonight? Okay. It would be wonderful for you to come up to the microphone, and let's just make this a crowded thing. It's not really designed to be all that pretty tonight. We're just simply doing this. Any kind of question that you would like to ask, just simply come up to the microphone, and we'll try to work it out.
I can scoot around.
Thank you, and this will be something I'm not used to.
Okay, move to your right and duck.
Oh, I see.
Okay, a little bit more to your right and duck, okay?
You're
These
fine.
guys are great, okay?
Okay. Again, wonderful program.
Okay,
I enjoy
point the
coming in.
microphone towards your mouth a little bit. Okay, go for it.
You asked a question a moment ago that makes sense, and what would an atheist ask a theist about the teaching of what they teach? So it would be a fair question then to ask a theist, when you know things in the Bible are cruel or inhumane, and you're not cherry picking, and you as a theist or a preacher know this, you've been to school, you've been taught, and you've certainly had ample opportunities to ask questions. How can you continue to teach? And I'm not saying you, but as a preacher, how can you continue to preach something that you know is terribly offensive or terribly harmful and hurtful? How can you continue to do that?
Are you a theist or an atheist?
No, I'm an atheist.
You're an atheist.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know how a person, I can't answer for other theists. I am a theist, but I don't know how a person could say, I believe in the doctrines of infanticide, genocide, and slavery found throughout the Bible. I can't agree with it. I can't agree that there truly is an Adam and an Eve in the quote-unquote Bible. For instance, if I look at the ancient Hebrew writings, I'm not looking at something that we can read like the Declaration of Independence. I'm looking at what is called an abjad. An abjad is simply a consonantal text. A consonantal text is not only what it is, but it's also a nominal text. That means that the acquative verbs are not there, the ergative verbs are not there, and lots of transitive and intransitive verbs are missing. That means that you have to supply them. So if I took, just to give an example of this, if I took the Declaration of Independence or even our Constitution, which, you know, is quite large, if I took the Constitution of the United States and took all the vowel points out of it and took all the acquative verbs out and took a sense of ergativeness out, and if I took out some of the transitive and intransitive verbs out of it, what would our politicians do with it? Could they read it adequately and actually govern any kind of, or could they really understand the read at all?
Mm-hmm.
And they couldn't, could they? And so my point is, when you're dealing with the writing system of the Old Covenant, it has been vowel pointed 4 different times by 4 entirely different groups of people. And it has been, and all of these pointing systems are diametrically opposed to each other. So if I state to you, Bereshit bara Elohim, that is a Masoretic rendering of the vowel pointings, and I can actually say that in 3 other different ways, and we don't know which ones are right.
That is part of why I'm enjoying this program so much with you, is that until I had heard you speak of something different than the King James Version, I really knew of nothing much more different than that. But now that you've exposed me to that, and now I've found Dr. Carrier, listening to him, Bart Ehrman, listening to him, finding these things on Google, and being able to listen and ponder and think about it, you know, you've exposed me to something brand new. And
Well, thank you.
Here again, that's why I enjoy coming to the program.
One of the things that I really contest about the King James Version, for instance, people who use the King James Version are not aware of this. Number one, it comes from a text base, not truly manuscripts, and it comes from a text base that was, much of that text base was actually back translated out of Latin back into Greek, and that is parts of the New Testament. It's a very failed text base. And number two, when you're reading the King James Version, one of the major arguments against it, it's that it's a direct model of translation theory, which is the worst form of translation theory. For instance, you can't say that Greek and English are egalitaric, one and the same. They're not one and the same. You can't say that they are identical. In other words, if I look at Greek participles and if I look at English participles, they're not one and the same. Different, altogether different. It takes years for an English mind to conceive of what Greek participles are even like. And so these languages are not similar. The King James Version is a form-critical translation. What that means is the translators were using a translation model that's extremely synthetic, and they were trying to swap form for form. In other words, they were trying to say, here is a noun, let me translate that into an English noun. Here is a Greek participle, let me find a participle in Greek to get an equivalent. There's no such thing. They are not equivalent. And so our parts of speech are not completely identical. Our syntax isn't identical. These are not compatible languages. They're not identical. They have some things in common. They're basically like the Olympic circles. Some things in common, most things not. And so my point is, translators have reconstructed various models over the years. They've moved into something called an oblique modeling, which means that you can't do word-for-word translating at all. Now, to shorten my point, if you look at the King James translation, you're going to find that these translators were not people who actually understood the Greek text at all. They didn't even understand the language. And here's why. If you look at deponent complexities in Greek and you look at the modeling of them in the King James Version, you do not have a consensus as to how deponents are actually treated. When it comes to the first and the second atheist, you do not find a consensus as to how that's being treated. I could go on and on and on. I would suggest that there are at least 100,000 to 200,000 mistakes in the King James Version, just in the portions of the New Testament. And that is not even considering the textual variants, nor the stylistic variants, because Bart Edelman rightly states that there are 400,000 textual variants. That is, when you include all of the manuscripts. And I like to put it in simple terms. You can augment, that is, change the plot of a movie if you change one word. That's all it takes. But today we have people trying to sell us a theology that's perfect or accurate or believable or actually God's word in the name of something that we really don't know. In other words, as a translator, I can tell you that we do not have the deictic and indexical elements of the text. And what that means, and let me see if I can explain it. If I asked you a question, do you know what it means in English? If someone said, I knocked a home run, you would probably say yes, correct?
I've heard you speak of this before.
Okay.
It has several meanings.
Right, it's
in several.
But for those who haven't heard me explain this, let me just do this again just to satisfy the curious mind. If I said I knocked a home run, I don't know what that means, because meaning is determined not just by linguistic elements, but by non-linguistic elements. It means that if I go to a baseball park and I see someone up to the plate and they knock the ball over, the fence, and they run around the plates, if that person says, I knocked a home run, I would get the gist of what that meant, because I could tie it to not just linguistic elements, but non-linguistic elements. if a person is at a rock concert playing a lead guitar and they rip out with a wonderful solo on a Fender Stratocaster, and I love Fender Strats, and they walked off stage and they were proud and they said, I knocked a home run, that would mean something quite differently. So we understand that sometimes when I'm looking at my wife, I can say, Now, that just means something special between us, okay?
I don't know if these guys are married, but I am, and
okay.
I know what you mean.
Gestures change everything. So Jesus using gestures with the very terms that are used in what we call the Scripture can change everything. Just because we have some of the linguistic elements doesn't mean that we have a comprehension of the text itself. And this is even much, much worse with the Old Testament because we don't have any of the vowel points and we don't have a lot of the verbs. We're missing so many different elements. And I keep trying to get theists to be honest. We don't know what it says. And so to take a text and attach it to an entity like a person or even a God is much, 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 much harder. And so I can appreciate the integrity of people like Bart Edelman. I don't think that he's asking the difficult questions because I think that most of our audiences are not educated enough to even wrestle with the Bible being questioned. And I think right now Bart Edelman is being very, very kind, and he's asking the simple questions. He's baby stepping. But in time, he's going to be asking some hardball questions and other people like him. And I want theists to become honest, and hopefully they can, become honest. But I don't know why they're not being honest. You should be able to go down to First Baptist Church tonight and say, look at the evidence. Next Sunday morning, share it with the people. You can go to the Free Thinkers Association and say, let's look at this evidence, and you guys are not going to reject the evidence. You guys will get happy, smile, have a party, have a drink, and say, let's look at it again. But that won't happen at First Baptist. What they're going to do is they're going to take the evidence and they're going to throw it out. And this is the problem with church life. They're going to throw the evidence out. And so I have no clue as to how to get theists to be honest. Now, if you do, and you can help us do it, I'm all ears.
No, I don't, but it was the honesty.
Okay.
That was my question.
Get into the microphone a little bit so everybody can see your face.
Sure, well, that was it. It's the honesty, is that seeing it there, and it is in the text, and that is the Bible that you teach Christianity from, and how can you honestly teach this? That's the part that puzzles me. Why there is no question that comes from the congregation, why this is not addressed or the question is flatly stated, why can't it be addressed in church? That really is my question. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
We have a couple of questions.
Before you get into those questions, hon, did either one of you guys have a comment concerning that?
When you were talking, or when he was talking about why you couldn't come, be honest about the what was in the Scripture, and it kind of reminded me of recently looking at the parents of the Boston bomber live on TV, coming to grips with what just happened to what their child did. I think it's to question the Bible is, for some people, is a lot harder than even that this is their whole foundation. So, I mean, we got to see it live, going through like all the stages of grief, denial, and having to come to grips with what, your child did. So that's where I think the stopping point is it's easier just not to talk about it. Is where
Yeah, I can think of when you say that you can bring the evidence into us at the Free Thinkers, there's a reason why. We have nothing really tied up to it. Myself, if there was really solid, good evidence that there was a God, okay, fine. if it's convincing to me, that's it. That's all I needed. That's all I ever wanted. I believe that. Full stop. Okay, fine. There's nothing for me that's invested in being an atheist or being to where I would not change my viewpoints. When it comes to religion, that is someone's identity. They are a Presbyterian. They are a Baptist. Their family have been Baptists. I've mentioned before, the other hard part is community. You know,
Right.
Your community is built around this idea.
Right.
You go to church with these people who all believe the same thing. And as a preacher, your job would be this, to preach the story. And why would a preacher preach this? Well, you have fear, and also, who am I to question God?
We have one viewer comment who asked this question: do all atheists make a habit of occasionally wearing awesome hats? And that's back to Alan.
That was from
Okay,
Charlie.
Go ahead.
My awesome hat's in my truck.
See,
Yeah.
you'd be getting more attention.
Well,
Yeah.
it's just, I wanted to be different. I'm an individual, so I might as well dress like one.
That's
Good,
wonderful.
good answer.
Yeah.
Good answer. Christian, one second. Christian Lucas says, could it also be that things are getting better every day because more people are changing their ideas or idea of God from one of abject terror to one of absolute love?
Which is changing first, the culture or God? The culture is changing first, and then God changes afterwards. It's when you have the big changes, like what brought about the United States of America, it was the Enlightenment. After the Enlightenment, you have people who have a much more friendlier version of God, yeah. But it doesn't mean that that's because people got to know God better. It's that the culture has changed, God has changed. Now, from there you can say that, yeah, people believe in this kinder God, they go out and do good. And that's fine. And my question would be, well, if God changes because the culture changes, why do we need God? Why can't we just improve the culture? You know, and regardless, to me, that's regardless of whether you believe in God or not. Make the culture better. Everybody else benefits.
Now, there was a question concerning the text base that I was in reference to. Is the text base you're talking about the Textus Receptus? It's actually the third edition of the Textus Receptus.
Also, Christian wants to know, would you say, Dr. Jones, then, that the story of the flood came from the epic of Gilgamesh?
There are some possibilities there. I would argue that if we look just at the syntax, if we look at the writing styles, etc., we're going to take it back to Yegetic. And from that point on, it's going to be still highly questionable. I don't think that we can tell at this time. There are some studies being done to look into this further, but at this point we don't have enough to even put together a valid premise.
I don't think we even have the original epic itself. We have a fragmentary copy, and the epic itself isn't telling the story. The story happened to somebody else that's relayed in the epic, which probably means it's earlier, so we don't have the original story itself to compare.
Okay, Christian also wants to know, Michael claims he would let go of his atheist position the moment that valid evidence is presented. Is this the position of the majority of atheists that you possibly know of, or do you represent a minority atheist view?
That was Charlie.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was Charlie.
I would hope it's a majority view. And from the people that I follow, it certainly seems to be. I think the standard position is to be an agnostic atheist. We don't know. The evidence doesn't really support there being a God. So if there's no evidence, we don't believe. Now, there are people who do claim to be evidence. A lot of this evidence would support any deity or any concept of a God or a cosmic teapot or a flying spaghetti monster. And I'm not being that to be funny. That's the reason why those claims were made or those examples were made, is because you can use the same evidence regardless. And that, to me, that either means it doesn't exist or there's no point for it to exist. It's something we created.
I'm curious, what do you think the best position, or what's the best argument, I should ask, that you've ever heard concerning God?
The best argument for
God.
The one that we can still say has some strength would be, well, what got it all started? But when it comes to that kind of question, to me, that's basically saying, well, we don't know how it got started, so we're going to say it's God. And that would be, and that's just not satisfying. That's just saying, I don't know, therefore God. And that's been a constant thing throughout history, is we don't know how something happened, therefore God. We don't know where thunder came from, lightning, Thor, Zeus, God. Athena had the thunderbolts too at one point, I remember. And aside from that, there was a point the morality argument was sort of convincing, but I no longer find it at all relevant.
What goes on at these Freethinker Association meetings? What goes on there?
Mostly it's just people enjoying each other's company. It's being able to ask questions or say things that you normally don't get to do in the company you're in. It's finding people who are like-minded, and for me, a lot of the times, it's finding people who are more intelligent than I am that I can talk to, that may know more about something that I've found curious, or to look at questions or statements of religion in new ways. But majority of it is just enjoying each other's company. I mentioned before, we'll talk about comic books. I mean, just whatever. And it's not, obviously that's not a uniquely atheistic thing, but it's not really meant to be an atheistic thing. It's a community thing. We just all happen to be free thinkers. In fact, not everybody there's an atheist either. So it's being able, really the end point is a free thinker meeting is one where we can talk.
What can we do? What can we do to support people like you?
Videos like this, giving a space to publicly ask questions and get answers. Really, that's the biggest thing. Being a different voice is saying, no, we don't have to argue about this. The biggest issue right now in the U.S. is really polarization. It is people who are unable to bend their viewpoints to compromise, at the point where compromising it now is a weakness. So is changing your mind. And so to be in a format or to be in an area where you can change your mind, where you can compromise, or where you can say, you know, you have a good point there, I'll be back next week, let me tell you what I've learned then, or to just talk and think and share ideas.
How often are atheists, and I want to go back to this because Alan was bringing up a wonderful point. I think you were afraid, in a sense, correct? To say things around theists because something might happen. And I keep saying that I wasn't aware of how much atheists are bashed. And it really sickens me. And it's like atheists, in a sense, have to say, I have to go undercover. I have to, in a sense, not be so open with my atheism because people will not understand me. Can you guys speak about that a little bit?
One thing I always get the question is how can you be moral? And I mentioned before, that to me is a terrifying question. Not because I can't answer. I can answer it very easily. I can answer it in length and detail, and more detail than is needed. But that's something that says, I trust the person standing across from me who's asking the question. Sometimes I've gotten this question from people I would trust with my life. If I had children, I would trust them with my children. But they're saying that they are not a moral person themselves. And that, to me, that statement, and all that statement contains, terrifies me. But when it comes to being an atheist, now, I have met a lot of people who have been actually discriminated against, actively discriminated against, either for skin color, for their gender, for their sexuality, things that are not as easy to hide. There's even sexuality that you would think that'd be easy to hide, but there are people do tend to pick up on it somehow or another. And so when I hear that atheists are discriminated against, they are. 7 states were not allowed to run for office. Just flat out. It'll be contested. It will not be held up in court. It is against the Constitution. But they will not be able to run for office. So I'm always kind of nervous when people say they're discriminated against. But I've received very descriptive messages on what people would do if they were in my company. And like you were saying, there's stuff I like to put on my truck. I'm a humanist. I would love to put a humanist symbol on my truck. I would have to explain what that symbol means. Explaining what that symbol means would cause more trouble than it's worth. I love conversation. I love getting into debates with people, usually because I always learn something. I'm always shown to be a fool, at least in one regard. But in your public life, that's not something you can do. And it comes back to the polarization. We should be able to do this. 1800s, late 1800s, Robert Ingersoll, Mark Twain were going around giving talks or writing stories about religion and just denouncing religion. They did this with crowds of people who were theists, who were atheists. They had wonderful conversations with these people. They had no death threats against them. That was over 100 years ago now. Why can't we do that now?
When we put this out, we said the New Covenant group, atheists and theists together. When we did that, it was like a tidal wave. That is, family members and all kinds of other people just running away. And it bothered me. It really, really bothered me that so many people would say, I'm not going to come and have anything to do with you anymore. I had one of my cousins who is more or less a famous singer who was supposed to be here at one of our venues who refused to come simply because we were having atheists here on our show. And I said, because we're talking with atheists, do you think that Jesus wouldn't talk with atheists? And, he couldn't respond to that. But he said, I will never have anything to do with atheists for the rest of my life. And I find that to be repulsive. I find it to be sick. And yet, unfortunately, it's common. And so my next question is, do all atheists experience lots and lots of rejection?
Well, I'm going to speak real quick, and then I'm going to let him talk because I'm talking too much already. I lost a girlfriend who I dated for 3 years. I have had extreme difficulty finding another person to share my time with. And there were issues in my family when I found out. Not with my... one parent was absolutely fine, and the other was not. There were issues. Though at least we did make up, and everything is fine from there. There were other issues with other family members, and to the point where if they don't know, I'm not going to tell them. And I personally hate lying. I absolutely hate it, even if sometimes I'm good at it. But and to the point, if you ask me a direct question, I will automatically answer it. I just dislike lying. I will lie to a person if they ask me, as much as I'd hate to. If they ask me the question, are you a believer, I will say yes. Saying the answer to the believer is easy. Do you have faith? Yes. Are you a believer? Yes. Do you believe in God? No. But
I think atheists tend to be very good about gauging what kind of reaction they're going to get from someone else, and are very good at picking their battles, and avoiding the subject altogether, just kind of stepping away from it. But in my personal experience, my sister being gay, it shattered our family from front to back, and me not participating in my mom's church was pretty much a permanent deal breaker. So we had an odd experience where after my father had passed away, she went into this cycle of only wanting to be with him, like was just welcoming this, please take me, please take me. So I saw this opposite effect of religion actually driving her towards wanting to die, but not by her own hands. And it shattered the family from front to back. So atheists realize the implications sometimes of when you're having conversations with people, just what you're about to say. And I can avoid the conversation. We're also really good at overcompensating, trying to be nice. It's like we have to put our representative out there. If we're going to, be named atheists, now we have to be this super. It's like we're not allowed to be mad at anything, we have to, always try to be nice about it and cordial. But discrimination-wise, when I was in a job that dealt with the public quite a lot, I could feel people asking me probing questions all the time, and you are forced to, in a sales position, to just go along with them if they want to pray about it, and it feels wrong to me. But there's no reason for me to take that battle on right then and start questioning their thing, and throwing scriptures and asking them questions. So that would be my take on it, as far as discrimination goes.
Now, we have a theist in the studio who wants to ask a question, and I would like to do it this way. I want you to come up here and sit in my chair, and I'm going to stand over there with the atheist as you ask the atheist the question. Could you do that?
Okay, I guess we're against all those atheists over there.
Well, he called me a theist, and I don't know if that is completely an accurate description.
Okay, what are you then?
I mean, I am what I am.
Okay. What is
the
that?
best. I mean, yeah, I believe in God most of the time. But I guess the thing I was going to bring up is, we as humans like to classify people, atheists or theists. Do you believe in God? If you put a check in this box, yes, then okay, you're a theist. Or, I guess it's convenience or whatever. I don't know why we do it, but we do. But it seems like I see both sides. Theists, atheists, whatever. Have this search for truth. And I think maybe part of the search for truth is sort of an ego trip. Like we want to know what's right so that we can be right and everybody else can be wrong, or But I think there's more than that. There's a drive for this truth, and I don't know where it comes from. And also, I'm sorry, what is your name?
Michael.
Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
No
You mentioned about humanists and like caring for people. There's a drive for that, even though you don't have anything, I guess it's sort of base it on like a God or something, to say that drive comes from. There's still a drive there, and I guess my question is, if we can, get rid of the language, say, of what a theist would ask or an atheist, could this drive that drives both, theists or atheists be the same thing, or come from the same place? I was going to say something else, and I don't remember exactly.
Well, I mean, just that alone is a fantastic
Yeah.
question.
Excellent question.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say yeah. I mean, a lot of people are driven by a search for truth, or driven by something, whether it's search for truth or to do good. Some people find the best way for them that works for them is to do it through religion. Otherwise, or other people find the best way to do it is to volunteer for Medicine Sans Frontier or Doctors Without Borders or Habitat for Humanity or any of these other organizations, and they have their own philosophy and own reasons why. And I mentioned before at some point or another, my whole thing is that the issue I have with religion is the fundamentalism it encourages. If you look at a militant atheist, the worst he's going to do is call you an idiot. That is really the worst. If it's Christopher Hitchens, he's going to do it in such a way you're going to be proud to have been called an idiot by that guy. But if you get a fundamentalist Christian, you get somebody who's going to blow up an abortion clinic or is going to destroy a library because it contains heretical books. Same with a Muslim. I don't know about, I have heard about fundamentalist Hindus. I've never had any direct interaction with a fundamentalist Hindu or Buddhist, both of which, again, fundamentalism in this regard is damaging. Now that's religion. The same thing can be true of nationalism of any kind, where it's a fundamentalist thought. So really, I'm against fundamentalism in that sense. But that's something, that drive is a good thing when it's applied correctly. You don't get people discovering the cure for cancer or the cure for polio. And I say the cure for cancer, I have friends who are going to kick me on that. Cancer is a big, many diseases under one roof. Please don't do anything to me when you find me in an alley about that.
Well, if they're atheists, they won't. You say they won't do anything.
Well, they're atheists, but they're also doctors.
And I would say also, when you were asking about doing good deeds and things like that, if you attribute it to a higher power, you kind of lose the high you get from doing favors for people, you know, just out of complete altruism. You're just, I'll use a dumb example, just every time we go through the toll bridge, we always usually pay for 2 or 3 cars back. There's nothing we're going to get in return for it, but there's that feeling that you've just done something nice. But if you believe it really wasn't you doing that, you kind of, to me, it seems like it would take away a little bit from that nice thing you did, or saying it was for, you know, an ulterior motive. That's where I would say the problem would be a little bit, attributing it to something other than just your own goodness.
Can I comment on that? Well, for me, it's been being able to attribute it to something has been, there's another feeling there that you're part of something bigger. Mm-hmm. It's not just you that is giving whatever goodness, but something greater that you're a part of, and everyone, and like you're a part of, and so I feel like that is, there's almost more, like you get almost more of a high or whatever you call it from experiencing that than if it was you as an individual doing something. But anyways, I did want to make one more comment. I feel this believing in God or not believing in God, I feel like there's almost like a more important question whether or not you believe in God, but do you love God? Or if you're an atheist, do you love life or love fellow man? Because I feel like that's probably I just feel like that's much more important.
Yeah, that's very good.
Well,
I don't know if that's a question to answer. You might.
Well, go ahead.
Well, for me, the question to your seeking for truth, the drive that people have, in my opinion, it would be almost like a childish curiosity, since as children we're the most curious.
Why?
Because it's a new world. Because it's a new world.
But to what you were saying about when you do something for something greater than you, for me that's humanity. All the good I do benefits humanity, whether I see it or not, and that's the bigger picture. That's if that's what I would hope for. If I die and I'm forgotten, so what? As long as what I did benefited humanity. Now, whether I love life, yeah, it's great. If you ignore the oil on the beach occasionally, if you ever go to one of the things I love doing is snorkeling and just seeing all the stuff that you find, the fish, the bits of rubble that get washed up, the occasional 16th century shipwreck. I've not actually found that. I want to so badly. But there's a lot of things that are great in this world. There are also a lot of things that are absolutely terrible in this world. But the great things are the ones to live for, and when you can share them with other people, or when you can make it so that other people can experience what you get to experience, that's wonderful.
Well, that's all I had, so I'm going to go sit down.
You did good, Ryan.
Anybody else? Alan, I think you were going to say something else, weren't you?
Looks like I'm back up at the bat.
Yeah, I thought that I thought Ryan did excellent. Asking the question, if both of us are doing the same thing, and if it's coming from the same source, why do we have to have a label? In essence, I think that's, in a sense, what he was trying to suggest. And we had a discussion, I think it was maybe a week ago, Wednesday night, about the altruistic gene.
Yes.
Do you guys have any comments about that particular gene?
The gene itself,
Right.
I'm not familiar with. I am familiar with the work of Franz de Waal and James Haidt, I believe his name is, that shows altruism in basically all creatures, regardless. And to me, at least for one thing, that would very much strike against the idea of God as being, or as religion being something that keeps humanity in check. Because we see this all through, especially in our closest relatives, the bonobos and chimpanzees, who, I would say that we're basically good people. We don't need religion to keep us in check, and that should be strengthening. That should be, we don't need religion in check. That should strengthen religion in a lot of ways, I think. Because then you can say, look, this is not right. We know this is not right. It goes against our basic nature of deciding what's right and what's wrong. Now, when you're saying that, why do we have labels? Something in science that I really love is you have these different countries with their scientists who are all working towards similar projects. They have competitions of who gets things done first. Whether it's getting something to the International Space Station, the next space launch, whatever else it may be. As a country, they fund their scientists to make fantastic projects. So, okay, we're atheists, you're theist, here's our competition, make the world a better place. Whoever wins, great. Regardless of who wins, we end up with a better world.
Yeah, we all win.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love about the New Covenant group, it's not about keeping the line of division between atheists and theists. It's about erasing that line. It's about people coming together and saying, do I really need the label?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't we just be human beings and try to deal with evidence and have a meaningful life and start a conversation and look at some possibilities? Christian Luca asked a question. Would you read it?
Sure. He says, is it not possible, Michael, to see God as an abstract idea that is useful, just as infinity is a useful mathematical concept, but it is not actually observable necessarily? Which is to say, infinities come into play in physics, but physicists try to discard them in their calculations to get something physically meaningful. Yet, infinities are still useful mathematically, and it has enabled math to progress a great deal recently because such great abstraction. Yet, such abstraction has led to set theory. Is it not possible that focusing on a more abstract notion of God, as, say, pantheists such as Einstein believed, could lead to further exploration and expansion into new subjects or territories?
Okay. Well, Einstein was at best a pantheist. Most likely he was either a deist or a straight-out atheist. I'm only saying that because I get a lot of responses about what he believed, and I've read some of his stuff. But, yeah, as an abstract idea, sure. If we can, we want to go with the Christian God, if we get rid of the Old Testament, the parts of the New Testament, especially a lot of Paul, Or if we just have this abstract idea of good, sure, but why? Infinities are useful in math until we have a better answer for that infinity. My feeling is we don't need that anymore. It was useful in the past. Maybe people, and I'm saying that people still need it, but I'm saying as a culture, as everybody, do we really need that placeholder anymore in order to do good, to explore the cosmos, to learn, to grow, to help other people? And I don't think we do. If you want to have it, or if you find a reason that it's useful, great, use it. Use it to the best of your ability. People, I know some atheists will say, well, that's a crutch. Sometimes you need a crutch. You know, if you need a crutch to walk properly, use the crutch. And I'm not saying that as offensive. I'm saying that really, if that works for you, that's fine. I'm saying that if you're saying that it's a placeholder, and my view would be it's no longer needed.
Do you have any other comments that you would like to make before we end the show, Alan? You've been wonderful with the hat.
The earlier comment about using different titles than atheist, the secular humanist, I also use as a divider to divide me from the atheists who are actually moutheists, who are the type of people.
Mouththeist?
Yes.
Okay.
God exists and he's out to get you.
Something like that, or they will attack people who are religious without anything really holding
The
them
people
back.
who cross out "In God We Trust" on the money, or if you say "God bless you," they come back with a witty retort, or not so witty retort. The issue I would have with that is right now we have the atheism visibility movement that's done by a lot of different people in a lot of different groups. You have the American Atheist, Ask an Atheist, a bunch of these different groups that work together. Many of them disagree with how the other groups go along with it, or they work in different ways. They may not necessarily disagree on how it's done. But the basic point is to get people, yes, I am an atheist, for no other reason than to have us recognized. Because if we all like, if someone asked me, yeah, I would much prefer to say that I'm a humanist, because that actually tells you something about me. You know, what my beliefs are, what my methods are, what I would plan to do going forward. Identifying me as an atheist should tell you squat.
Yeah.
And I mean, you don't know if I'm a Buddhist. I might be a Wiccan. I might be I might believe in ancient aliens. You know, hey. No.
This has been fun tonight. Just simply listening to journeys, experiences, and the fears. Something that we all have to deal with. You know, the fear of what will people do if they know that I don't think like they do. And unfortunately, I think that, well, let me share this before we quit or end the show. We had a hospice chaplain on our show a few weeks ago, and he made the claim, and that's really hurt me. He made the claim, theists, when they die comfortably. But when atheists die, they're afraid. And he very much believes in hell. And so I asked him this simple question. I said, could it be possible that you may be right? That maybe atheists die maybe a little bit more uncomfortable than theists. But could that be because theists have been sharing all kinds of tactics, that is, of fear, troubling their minds, that is, in death? And he didn't want to answer that. Because I think that, just to be honest with myself, theists have scared the hell out of me. And I can understand why atheists would say, you know, if there is a group of people trying to bring insecurity into humanity, it would be theists that make us insecure in various areas of our lives. And so I can understand why atheists, that is in death, facing death, I can understand why they would be insecure, because if you're told day in and day out all kinds of things, and you're laying there and you're about to die, you're grasping at straws.
Yeah.
And that's tragic. And this is where we really need to get this conversation going. We need to quit allowing people to condition us to think in a very troubled way, especially when we're dying. This is the thing that I really dislike about theism. It's because it presents various models that do trouble us. That is, at the point of death. And I'm all about trying to comfort human beings, and I think Jesus was right. I think we need a comforter. We need to be comfortable in life, and we need to find something that's meaningful for us. And so with that said, anything else, honey?
No, I think that about wraps it up. I was thinking along the same lines with Ryan, if we came in here tonight and we didn't identify ourselves as one way or the other, you know, I don't think it would have mattered. We could have just had a conversation and gave our thoughts, and we could have gone out of here without labels. You know, labels belong on soup cans.
Yeah, I need to apologize to you, Ryan. I'm sorry for calling you a theist. You asked a magnificent question. Yeah, we're going to get you a trophy and all of that. And by the way, I'm so thankful that you guys came our way tonight, and you guys really touched our heart. And whatever we can do for you, I want you to be on as many times as you're willing to be on, because things need to change. They do. Human beings need to have something. Go for it, Michael.
I just wanted to say one last thing real quick. You're mentioning about the people who come in to comfort the dying. They're almost always religious. They're almost always chaplains of Methodist or some denomination. Part of this is how difficult it is for a humanist or an atheist of any philosophy to get in and be a chaplain at these services. We're just now getting to that.
And I think the Navy's bringing that out.
And the Navy's actually fairly progressive, I've found. As Air Force and Navy, the actual Army is the slowest on it. But the Boston bombings that have recently gone on, humanists, well, atheists, but this would have been a humanist, were banned from taking part in the ceremony. Now, they could have been in the audience, but as everyone else, it was interfaith, everyone else was able to say their part. Atheists were not. Now, the Humanist Association has gotten together in the city and are doing their own memorial service, but that's part of the problem, is we're not welcome. We're not, if we're going to comfort our own dead, it's going to be in the privacy of our own home. There's not going to be when we go to the hospital to pass on, we're not going to have, or, well, by the time I'm there, hopefully there won't, I'm sure there will be, but at least up to now, there has not been someone with the same, feeling. And I know I would say, too, if you're going to die, do not go gently into the dark night.
Right. One of the things that troubled me when my father was dying this last year, and I love my father, awesome man, but nurse after nurse, physician after physician said, listen, because he's a believer, you don't have anything to worry about. And every person that stated that, I said, are you nuts? Why would you say that because he's a believer, he has nothing to worry about? Why wouldn't you just try to comfort everyone? Why would you think that anyone, any human being, would be in any more jeopardy than another person simply because of what they believe to be true? And it was alarming that so many health professionals actually told me, that is, during those last days that my father was getting cancer treatment, well, it's good that he's a believer because he doesn't have anything to worry about. And I can understand the troubling waters for so many people going through these experiences, and they're going through them right now. And theists are scaring the hell out of them, and that's tragic.
Yes.
And so maybe we can get some atheist to pray an atheist prayer for him. joking. Greg Brahe likes to do that. Nevertheless, I'd like to thank you for your time. Please come back. This is the place for intellectual, spiritual, and scriptural honesty. We're not there. We're still growing up, and we need atheists and theists alike to come our way and somehow say, let's not pay attention to the labels. Let's just be human beings wrestling with the same evidence, the same problems. Let's see if we can move forward together. That would be so, so nice.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, what an incredible night having a discussion with these wonderful people, but I got to tell you, as a theist, I'm starting to feel like an endangered species. Michael, Alan, by a show of your thumbs, when I become endangered, will you set up a state park to protect me and allow me to breed in peace? I said by show of thumbs. Thumbs up, thumbs down. That's all I need. Oh, guys, we had a great time. Join us next Wednesday at 7 o'clock for the Unconventional Pastor and Dr. Jones afterwards, and then we'll do this all over again next Sunday from 10 to 10. We'll see you then.